Heather, how would you define inclusive hiring practices, and how have such practices expanded the talent pool in the context in which you work? So you could be looking at, council and being a trustee, but you could also look at your work within the pizza industry. So how would you define inclusive hiring practices, and how have such practices expanded the talent pool in your context?
Okay, so thank you for the question. Generally speaking, inclusive hiring practices to me mean creating an environment for equal opportunities for everyone, and to provide a safe space for people to learn and to grow. It also means to me that we embrace the cultural and diverse richness of individuals. We see them as human, not as the identity that they take on, whether it be culture or race or religion, but we see people as human beings. And so for me in the pizza place, and quite honestly, it is a little easier to talk about the pizza place because that was the foundation. That was a core of our business. We made pizza, but what we did was we provided a safe environment for people to, especially when they were getting their first jobs, to really grow and to learn a skill and a way of being that they could take out into the world and they could share with other people. And it came in the package of a box that looked like a pizza, but really what you were getting was the fullness of the people who were involved in making that pizza from start to finish. And so that was my philosophy. And so we really did have a very diverse workforce. It was amazing. And people would come and they'd say, I really want to work here, but, and it's like, okay, can you make a pizza? I don't know. And I said, well, 3-year-olds can make pizzas, so I'm pretty sure you can make a pizza. So we just really embraced that. And what we saw was that people who maybe weren't used to that environment quickly became supportive of that environment. And that was like a pebble in the water, and it just grew. That was very satisfying for me. I'm probably babbling, just cut me off when you want. But it really does increase the number of people who will apply. So oftentimes if someone feels that maybe they don't measure up to that environment, oh, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not this, I'm not that. For us, we found that people would just come anyway, and they would say, here's where I am today. I really want to work here. Will you hire me? And so I felt that it was an open door for people, and we never had trouble hiring people. We always had a lot of resumes, and my employees stayed for 5-10 years. For me, it was a benefit, and also for them. They were richer because of that inclusive environment.
I absolutely love your notion of the pebble in the pond with the ripples, because what you're describing, Heather, almost sounds to me like a mission that you set out to make the world a better place, a different place, and you did it one individual at a time by creating safety and respect. Thank you so much for that. Peter, over to you. How would you define inclusive hiring practices, and how have such practices expanded the talent pool in your context?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I want to say. Maybe the luxury of being a small service provider in a small rural community is that we don't necessarily feel that we need to be married to policy. And I think the word policy gives a sense of an obligation. And I like to think that we come at things from a place of building relationships and a place of kindness. So working with that kind of value is more how I want to lead through our examples as an organization. I think, faced with the challenges of trying to hire a diverse population, there is no better example than the Diversity Disconnect team. And we were very fortunate to have a really great opportunity with our research assistants. And so we sought people with lived experience, as you mentioned, Roberta, and we had somebody with Indigenous heritage, and we had a person with a disability. The team also included amazing women and people of trans and queer backgrounds. So the grouping had this amazing kind of energy and power. And I think the other part that really resonated with the interviewees was the fact that they were people who also lived in remote rural communities, which I think at times was almost the more foot in the door kind of a piece. Yeah, we live in, Agassiz.
Mm-hmm.
So that relationship building is what really led to a highly successful program. The team was so connected. They went through amazing experiences together. They supported each other when they faced discrimination or ignorance. It was amazing hearing those stories from their experience. And so I think that in many respects, the Diversity Disconnect project itself became the message in a way. Certainly to me, it did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I've got so many memories of, us encountering barriers that they'd gone way out of their way to identify or avoid. And I'm thinking specifically of the time that the team had made a special trip to a place where we were going to have to stay overnight in order to check out that the hotel accommodation was wheelchair accessible. They had phoned, they went on site, they checked it out. Yes, it was. And then when our individual research assistant that was in a wheelchair went to get into her room, there was a ledge this high between the walkway and the room that a wheelchair couldn't go in. And our other assistant built a ramp. So, Faith, you'd be happy that she could use tools. And so she built a ramp that got the other assistant in and out of the room. So, that need for flexibility, but also that need for recognition and awareness that people say, oh, we have a ramp, but weren't even thinking that ramp didn't get the individual into the room that they needed to get into. So thanks for that. I'd like to turn to Faith with the same question. How would you define inclusive hiring practices, and how have such practices expanded the talent pool in your context?
Yeah, so I would define inclusive hiring practices as those that help level the playing field, essentially. DEI to us is about ensuring that everyone, especially those from underrepresented groups or groups that may have trouble connecting with a given industry, in my context, construction, have an opportunity to apply and be given a chance and considered for a position. For us, expanding the talent pool by inviting that wider audience to participate has become a solution to the skill trade shortage, which I kind of mentioned before. And also, like from a program perspective, I wanted to touch on something that I think both Heather and Peter mentioned about representation. We noticed that when we were at job fairs promoting our program, if we had our stand-up banners that have our imagery on them, and it has like your sort of typical construction worker, like a white guy, that's all we would get coming to the table. And we noticed that women and people from other cultures weren't really that interested in us. So we made a concerted effort to start showing representation of different cultures, different genders on our signage. And we saw a difference. Girls would come up to us at high school job fairs and feel included just because they were represented in that imagery. So something that seemingly small can make such a big difference. Also, when I'm hiring staff for STEP for the program, I try to make sure that, and I'm sure a lot of us are aware of this, I try to make sure that the language used in our job postings is gender neutral and appeals to everyone. So we've all heard the stuff about, saying salesperson instead of salesman or tradesperson instead of tradesman, which, is fair enough. We want to make sure that we're, appealing to all genders. But also, studies have shown that men respond to more competitive, result-oriented type statements in job postings, whereas women tend to respond to more like collaborative teamwork kind of descriptions. So including this kind of language, as applicable to the job, of course, has helped us appeal to a wider candidate pool, which improves our odds of hiring the right person. And essentially, that's what we're trying to do.
That's fantastic. And I absolutely agree with you. We're very careful about images that we choose for PowerPoint presentations and posters and handouts and books that I've written, and the case examples that we use. And when people start to see themselves represented, they're much more likely to pursue that as a goal. But again, it's awareness, isn't it? It's so interesting. Like when I took on the job of director of a center at UBC, and the only images in an environment like UBC that is so multicultural, the only images were all white, and mostly male for certain departments and mostly female for other departments. So until you are aware of that, then nothing happens to create the change. Thanks so much to all three of you. Question 3 is going to start with Peter this time. And we're interested in what changes have you noticed that indicate employees are more engaged or productive because of your inclusive hiring practices? Because we know from an employer's perspective that the work needs to get done. Employers are hiring people for a purpose. And so do you have any proof that the folks that you're hiring are creating a more engaged and productive workplace because you have inclusive practices?
Yeah, I definitely have seen that shift over my career in the field. And certainly, there is a shift in just the attitudes of people, both within the organization and within the community as a whole. And I think that where it really pays off is that we try to create an organization that leads with compassion and care. We are serving people very often in the worst moments of their life. And so sometimes I've referred to a spa approach. I just want people to feel taken care of in that space, but at the same time empowered. And so I think that what happens for my colleagues is that when we have an opportunity to work alongside people of diverse backgrounds, that starts to impact the way that we reflect on humanity. And so it builds that structure of kindness that we can lead with as an organization. And quite frankly, it has translated into data because we capture a lot of data thanks to our funders. And the outcomes within our organizations are excellent. We constantly are hearing feedback from the funder that we are exceeding their expectations. We're helping people in a very real way to gain employment and to be successful. And I think that it comes basically from that approach of leading with the heart.
Thank you. And certainly that's been my experience working with your organization. So it doesn't surprise me that your stats support that. Faith, what changes have you noticed that indicate employees are more engaged or productive because of your inclusive hiring practices?
Sure. So something that we've noticed both as BCCA is an organization that supports employer companies around the province in the construction industry, but also the employers and the participants, the job seekers that we're working with through the STEP program, is that DEI doesn't just help expand recruitment, but it also helps a lot with retention. So workers that feel safe from bullying and harassment and hazing, which unfortunately are a reality in some construction sites, are people that are free from those things are less distracted, they work safer, they're more productive. So that's an important part of our industry, is to have that level of production happening because of those safe practices. And it keeps people on board if they're not being harassed at work, if they're not being hazed, they feel more welcome in their space. They're able to just do their job. They come to work, they go home, and it's a great experience for them. But as well, we've noticed that diversity allows for new perspectives and better problem solving. I actually have my own personal experience from when I was a welder. I used to work in this little fabrication shop, and the owner of the shop was definitely someone you could describe as an alpha male. He often would fight with the other guys. And so as a result, he ended up hiring a lot of female welders. So it was a very co-ed environment, which a lot of the guys that we worked with would say they were actually way more comfortable in that co-ed environment. They felt like they could just kind of relax. Because I think, it took the edge off of the like machismo that they're used to on some other construction sites. And I think being a tough guy all the time is exhausting. So it just goes to show you that like they were more comfortable, they could just focus and be productive. And as well, like in terms of problem solving, if one of us had to go to the owner of the shop and maybe talk about a problem we were having with a project, we would select one of the women to go talk to him because he responded better to them. So it just gave us a little bit more of that. That diversity helped us communicate better with the owner of our company, with our clients that we're getting, bringing in projects to do. And it allowed us all to work more safely and more comfortably.
What a beautiful example. Yeah. And it reminds me, just even in the hiring that I've done at Life Strategies and in other organizations that I've led, I try to hire people that are not like me. We need to share values. We need to be committed, respectful, that kind of thing. So we'll share values, but I need people with very different skills and attitudes and life experiences, because I do me well enough. I don't actually need more me. But what I need are those different perspectives that are going to help us reach a wide range of people. So thanks so much for that, Faith. We'll turn to Heather now. And what changes have you noticed that indicate employees are more engaged or productive because of your inclusive hiring practices?
Okay, so I'll go back to local government. And so what I'm noticing is that our conversations are definitely richer. And I agree with what Peter and Faith have both said. And I was resonating so deeply with what they were talking about, just the environment and how it's changed and how the conversations are going in a direction that's creating expansion and new ideas, big thinking, critical thinking, and just new ways to do things that are benefiting in the school district, our students, our future. And just the way that we've created this environment that honors the diversity rather than fears it. It's looking at ways to celebrate the opportunities as opposed to feel the fear. And so I feel that our diverse workforce at the school district, for sure, is creating a much safer and optimistic environment for our students and creating a better future as well. So at the municipal level, we're working on, again, retention. And sometimes at the municipal level and even at the school district level, things happen where someone was hired and something changed. So maybe a workplace accident or something happened outside of the workforce that has changed their way of doing work. And so one of the things I'm very proud of is that we're strongly committed to retaining that employee and creating a space for them that now fits their new way of doing things. And I think that is so welcoming. So just because something happened doesn't mean you no longer can be there. That's the beauty of this diverse workforce, is that we create space, and it's valuable space. And that really does help keep people supporting the organization and speaking positively about the organization, and takes that fear away of what if. And I really appreciate that. Don't know if I've answered that question now.
I think you did a great job. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I particularly appreciated about what you said, Heather, was your mention of optimism. That, when people feel safe and they're productive, it creates optimism. And it's interesting in some of my earlier research, so not this, it wasn't the focus of this research, but optimism was the single best predictor of both career success and also job satisfaction. So sometimes those are seen as two very different things. Like you like your work, but you're not really perceived as successful. Or some people are successful, but don't necessarily like what they're doing. And optimism was the best predictor, the only best predictor actually of both of those things. So anything that you're doing in the workplace to create and foster optimism is a really important and good thing to do. And that's what you mentioned doing among so many other things. So thanks for that.